All right, let's get into it. We're about to tackle a topic that, can sound a little dry. We're talking about government rulemaking, but we're going to do it in a way you've probably never seen before, as a high-stakes football game. Today, we're breaking down the U.S. Coast Guard's playbook for writing the rules that keep our waters safe. And who better to kick us off than the legendary Coach Tom Landry? This quote, it just hits the nail on the head, because making a federal regulation isn't just some random, chaotic scramble. No, it's a structured, methodical game plan, just like coaching a team all the way to the Super Bowl. So what do you say? Grab your helmet and maybe your copy of the Federal Register, because we are headed to the gridiron of government procedure. And trust me, it's way more interesting than it sounds. So here's our game plan for today. First, we'll set the scene, the game itself. Then we'll meet the league and the teams. We'll follow the action from the first half kickoff through the all-important halftime show into the second half for the final score. And stick around for the post-game analysis. Okay, so what kind of game are we even watching here? Well, the official name for what the Coast Guard does is informal rulemaking. Let's break down what that actually means. The entire game really comes down to just two words: notice and comment. First, the government gives everyone notice that it's thinking about a new rule. Then, it opens the field for public comment. See? The whole process is built on transparency and public input. It's designed to make sure governing isn't a one-way street. You can't have a game without a league, a rulebook, and of course, two teams squaring off. So let's meet the key players in this regulation game. So think of the Administrative Procedure Act, or APA for short, as the official NFL rulebook for all federal agencies. It's the law of the land. Whether the Coast Guard wants to create, change, or even scrap a rule, they have to follow the playbook laid out in the APA. It's all about ensuring a fair game. And here are our teams for today's matchup. In the visitors' jerseys, we have the maritime miscreants. These guys are the problems the Coast Guard needs to solve. Think oil spills, catastrophic engine failures, cyber attacks. And facing off against them, the home team, the regulatory developers, a hand-picked squad of Coast Guard experts assembled to shut them down. Let's take a closer look at that home team roster. You've got your project manager playing quarterback, calling the plays and managing the clock. The subject matter expert, that's your offensive coordinator, designing the strategy to make sure the policy actually works. Then you have the project counsel, kind of like a referee liaison, making sure the team doesn't get hit with any legal penalties. And finally, the economist, who's like the general manager, running the numbers to make sure the benefits of the rule are worth the cost. All right, the whistle blows and the game is underway. The first half is all about the home team, the regulatory developers, getting their initial game plan down on paper and putting it out there for everyone to see. And the main objective of this first half? It's creating one single crucial document, the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, or NPRM. You can think of this as the opening drive. It lays out the problem, the team's proposed solution, and it's a formal invitation for everyone, and I mean everyone, to weigh in. The playbook for this half is pretty straightforward. First, the team drafts the rule. Then it goes through an intense review inside the Coast Guard. After that, it gets sent upstairs to the referees, agencies like the Department of Homeland Security and the White House's Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, or OIRA. They check to make sure the play is legal and makes economic sense. Once it clears all those hurdles, it gets published. And that's halftime. We're heading into the locker room for halftime. But this is not your typical break for orange slices and a pep talk. Oh no. This is where the entire game can change direction, because now it's the public's turn to get on the field. In this game, the fans in the stands are really the most important players. We're talking about maritime companies, environmental groups, everyday citizens, anyone with a stake in the outcome. Halftime is their moment to comment on that proposed rule, and their feedback is absolutely critical. It's really the democratic heart of the whole process. So how long do they get? Well, the Coast Guard typically puts 90 days on the clock. That's the official public comment period, a 3-month window where anybody can go online and make their voice heard. Halftime is over and the regulatory developers are heading back out onto the field. They've listened to the fans, they've heard all the cheers and the boos, and now they've got to adjust their game plan based on all that valuable feedback. Now, the second half playbook might look a lot like the first, but there is one huge difference. The team now has to go through and analyze every single public comment. They use that analysis to tweak, change, and shape the final rule. Then it's back through that same tough review process, both internal and external, before it can finally be published. And touchdown! The final rule is published in the Federal Register. The regulatory developers have done it. They've successfully driven down the field and put a brand new safety or environmental protection rule into the official playbook.
game over.
Well, almost. The clock doesn't stop right at the touchdown. The APA, the league rulebook, generally requires a 30-day waiting period after the final rule is published before it can actually take effect. This just gives everyone who's affected by the new rule a little time to prepare.
So the game might be over, but the work isn't quite done. Just like any good team, the regulatory developers head to the film room to review the tape and see what they can learn for the next big game.
So let's do a quick recap of the whole field. The ball moves from an initial idea through tons of analysis and review. It crosses the 50-yard line with public comments, and it's driven all the way to the end zone where the final rule gets published and officially becomes law, part of the Code of Federal Regulations. It is a marathon for sure, not a sprint.
Now, of course, not every game plays out the same. Sometimes the team has to call a few special plays. You might have a preseason game, which is called an ANPRM, to scout the field and gather intel before you even draft a rule. Or if those halftime comments are just so massive that they require a total change in strategy, the game might go into overtime with what's called a supplemental notice, which kicks off a whole new round of public comment. And that brings us to our final thought. This whole game plan we've walked through, with all its reviews and comment periods and analysis, it's designed to be deliberate, to be transparent, and to be collaborative. It prevents hasty, bad decisions and makes sure all voices get heard. But here's the big question to chew on. Does this methodical playbook, which is designed for fairness, sometimes get in the way of responding quickly when a new and dangerous maritime miscreant suddenly appears on the field? That's the fundamental trade-off, right? At the heart of the regulation game.